Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would do this little video that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video by that of a DontaesBoxingNation. And I thought that it was about time for me to talk about this little subject as well, because for those of you, of course, that have paid attention to the boxing scene, especially about that of Mr. Oleksandr Usyk, there has been a lot of rumors that Mr. Oleksandr Usyk, that for his next fight, that he very well just might fight that of the former WBC heavyweight champion, Mr. Deontay Wilder. And this, of course, has led to a certain amount of criticism because Deontay Wilder is kind of looked at as a quote-unquote shot fighter, or someone that is nowhere near as powerful or nowhere near as good as what he once was. And when I say powerful, I really should say as impactful or, quite as dominant as what he once was, because I believe that he's lost a few fights out of his last 4 or 5. Just in my personal perspective, although this is not a good look, I can understand why Oleksandr Usyk is doing this. Of course, we all know what DontaesBoxingNation is going to use this, as for leverage. We all know, of course, that his main goal is to make sure that guys like Oleksandr Usyk, that they are not remembered as the #1 pound-for-pound fighters of their particular era. So every time there's a story to where he can possibly tear down Usyk or in a way, he will take that advantage. But the thing also is this, I do have to agree with some of the people that are giving a little bit of criticism for that of an Oleksandr Usyk, because this is not a fight that really anybody needs to see. Now, I can understand, his perspective. I know why Oleksandr Usyk wants to do this. This is basically, kind of like almost a Michael Jordan situation where Michael Jordan, he always wanted to beat Magic Johnson and Larry Bird in the playoffs. But by the time overall that, he kind of met them in the playoffs, or if he would have met them, they pretty much, were about done, or were not the same players that they once were. We're talking about Larry Bird, because Larry Bird, by that of the, early to mid 90s, he had back injuries, he had, all this other stuff, ankle injuries, I believe. He was still a good player, but they were no longer the dominant Boston Celtics. And of course, the LA Lakers, they were not really the Showtime Lakers either. But Magic Johnson was still in his prime, in the early 90s. I believe he had even won an MVP, and that's why he was able to make it all the way to the NBA Finals. So it was very good that Michael Jordan was actually able to beat Magic Johnson in 1991. But the point is that, there are certain athletes that, especially, for their era, they want to be remembered as the greatest, and they want to, basically leave no stone unturned. And basically what that means is that they want to defeat every target in front of them or every personal goal in front of them. And I think that Oleksandr Usyk wants to beat all the quote-unquote great heavyweights of his era. There was Tyson Fury, of course. There was AJ Anthony Joshua. And now, of course, there is Deontay Wilder. I can understand why Oleksandr Usyk is doing this. I think that, once again, he believes that it's going to look great on his career, and for him that it would be a big, big goal. But at the end of the day, I just don't think that it would be a goal, or it would be something that leads to a lot of people that really would look that great, because a lot of people are going to take a look at this as fighting a shot version of a Deontay Wilder. And, that would be somewhat correct. Deontay Wilder is nowhere near the same fighter that he once was. Now, that being stated, this, of course, would also be a great opportunity for Deontay Wilder, because if he actually were able to beat that of an Oleksandr Usyk, and you never know with Wilder, he's not someone that is the best boxer. He's someone that is very sloppy, does not have the greatest of boxing techniques, but he has somewhat of boxing technique. He is a bronze medalist in the Olympics, and he's someone overall that is extraordinarily powerful, even for his age and even overall for the amount of wear and tear that he has suffered. But DontaesBoxingNation, of course, is also going to use this as leverage to say that he is avoiding that of a Fabio Wardley. Do I believe that Oleksandr Usyk is avoiding that of a Fabio Wardley? I don't think that he's afraid of Fabio Wardley or quote-unquote ducking him per se, but I just think that he takes a look at Wardley and a certain amount of the other heavyweights as, particularly not, a part of the quote-unquote big picture. I think he takes a look at them as very decent contenders, but I don't think he takes a look at them overall as guys that he really needs to have on his checklist, which I hope eventually that he does, because, this is not really a fight that, in my view, would really be necessary. The fights that, including myself and a lot of other people would want to see, are guys like that, of a Fabio Wardley, maybe a Joseph Parker, perhaps an Andrew Ruiz, and also like that of an Ajit Caballel. Those are pretty much the fights that a lot of people would want to see, or some of the fights that at least I would want to see. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what DontaesBoxingNation says. I'm sure we already know what he's going to try to say. But that being stated, Usyk is going to have to get at least a little bit of criticism for this, because this is not a fight overall that pretty much is on a lot of people's bucket list. Anyways, let's head into it.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So there's been a big breakup in the sport of boxing that old media is not really talking about. They're kind of quiet about it. And that is...
Well, let me actually talk about this very quickly. And not to pause and cut off Dante very quickly, but the title says, why is no one talking about this? Oleksandr Usyk not keeping his word or something like that. Actually, there's been a lot of people talking about this. I've seen a whole bunch of channels. I've seen several different channels talk about this. I've seen Ring Magazine ask overall if this fight was worth it. So actually, Dante's Boxing Nation is wrong. The reason why he's claiming that is because A, he doesn't believe that this story is getting enough coverage, and B, he doesn't, the accusations of Oleksandr Usyk being ducked overall, that they're not enough in his personal view. That's A and B. But really the main reason why Dante believes that this is not covered enough is because he really doesn't give a shit about Oleksandr Usyk. He doesn't really pay attention or care about that of an Oleksandr Usyk unless it's to run his name through the mud or to rake his name over the coals. So, I mean, it is what it is. That's really the only concern that some of these channels really have a concern with when it comes to that of an Oleksandr Usyk. They don't care about him any other way. The new media and the LDBC channels really don't give a fuck about Oleksandr Usyk that much unless it's to rub his name, overall in the mud or to put it in somewhat of a wrong light. They basically have not paid attention to the heavyweight division ever since Deontay Wilder got dethroned by that of a Tyson Fury. They have not given a shit about that division ever since. As soon as the heavyweight division was, the two best fighters in it were Caucasian fighters, they were checked out. They had no interest in it whatsoever. Because why would they? Their complete goal is to make sure that guys like that do not make it to the all-time great list. But anyway.
The breakup between Oleksandr Usyk and...
Which is why even when Usyk versus Fury was about to happen, which was a humongous fight, they basically had almost nothing to say in the lead-up of that fight. But I guarantee you, if it was Wilder versus Usyk, they would have been talking about that fight for weeks upon weeks upon weeks.
Zone. And what caused the breakup? Usyk deciding that he wants to go the Canelo route, which is to vacate his belts to avoid the toughest opposition. And this is the reason.
Pretty much exactly what I had predicted, of course, which is Dante's Boxing Nation overall claiming that Usyk is ducking that of a Fabio Wardley. I mean, you can claim whatever you want to. Of course, it's not a good look. Do I believe that he's avoiding that of a Fabio Wardley, someone that was losing by like 4 rounds in his last fight against Joseph Parker? No, in my personal view, no. But, I do understand the criticism because Oleksandr Usyk is going to have to face some of the younger contenders, especially if he is 100% for sure going to be remembered on the same list as guys like that of a Muhammad Ali or Lennox Lewis. He's going to have to do it.
Why the young undefeated lion, Fabio Wardley, is now the WBO heavyweight champion of the world. You see, originally, Usyk was planning on fighting Joseph Parker next, and he had no problem fighting...
Well, the world had actually overall planned for him to fight Joseph Parker next. This is a narrative overall that Dante has tried to use because what he's trying to claim is that Oleksandr Usyk had no problem with fighting Joseph Parker next, but now he has a problem with fighting Fabio Wardley. Listen, this is the first point. Anyone who has seen Fabio Wardley, he's a decent fighter, but he's not someone that, is astronomically skilled. He was getting completely outboxed in both of his last fights until he got the knockout. And to be quite honest with you, that stoppage against Joseph Parker I thought was a little bit too early. I kind of thought that there was a little bit of home cooking involved in that fight. But it is what it is. Anyways, that being stated, I'm sorry, but, Fabio Wardley is not someone that really is all that great of a fighter. I do think that he's an A-grade level contender, but I don't think that he's someone that Usyk takes a look at and just shivers in his boots. I don't think overall he takes a look at him as that. And if, also mark this down, mark my words, if Usyk does end up completely defeating that of Fabio Wardley, which more than likely is exactly what would happen, he's just going to claim that Fabio Wardley was not that good. That's all he's going to claim. He's just going to go back to the Joseph Parker fight and the Justin Huney's fight, and basically say, well, he's not that good. Take a look at those fights. So the point is that Usyk is never going to be able to win with that of a Dante's Boxing Nation. But does that still excuse this fight? No, in my personal view, it does not. Just because a certain amount of the criticizers or haters, just because they're never going to give you credit, you still do have to do great things in the sport in order to achieve a great amount of success, in order to achieve a great amount of credit. That's just how life works. So Usyk is going to have to eventually fight some of these young undefeated contenders, whether it's Fabio Wardley or that of Ajit Caballel, or also that, maybe, of other guys that may not be undefeated, but guys that may be worth his time. Maybe a Joseph Parker, someone like that.
Joseph Parker. But all of a sudden, Fabio Wardley, he derailed.
But Usyk never directly said that he was going to fight Joseph Parker, at least according to my recollection. Now, if I'm wrong about that, then someone can send me a link. The only time that I had ever seen Usyk mention that of a Joseph Parker was when he also mentioned AJ Anthony Joshua a third time, as well as a Tyson Fury a third time, after he knocked out Danny Dubois in the rematch last year. That was the only time I ever heard him mention Joseph Parker's name. Any other time other than that, I've never heard Usyk say Joseph Parker's name.
All of those plans by knocking out Joseph Parker. So leading up to the Wardley Parker,
which he really didn't do, by the way. Don't get it twisted. Fabio Wardley, overall, he did catch Joseph Parker in a slip-up, and Joseph Parker was dog-tired, you could tell. But Joseph Parker was pretty much just recovering, and then that ref, who is known, by the way, for some of the worst stoppages, overall in boxing history, he overall ended up stopping the fight. But anyway.
DAZN was already promoting the winner fighting Usyk next. So after Wardley knocks out Parker, what happens? Usyk, he goes completely silent for a very long time. And then out of nowhere, he breaks his silence by announcing that he wants to fight Deontay Wilder next. This is kind of like Virgil Ortiz saying that he wants to fight Errol Spence next. And DAZN rejecting the idea because they want Virgil Ortiz to fight Jaron Ennis next, because that's the fight not only DAZN wants, but the whole boxing world wants. It's the biggest fight at 154. They did the exact same thing with Usyk when it comes to him saying that he wants to fight Deontay Wilder next, instead of his number one mandatory who deserves the title shot, Fabio Wardley. Fabio Wardley has been knocking out undefeated fighters left and right, and top contenders like Joseph Parker. This is a different style that Usyk has ever been in a ring with. It would have gave us more of an idea to know how good Usyk is. Yeah.
And once again, DontaesBoxingNation is going to use this once again as leverage to say, well, we still don't know how good Usyk is because he hasn't been in there with that many different styles. Oh, that is a bunch of horse shit. Not only has Usyk been in with a whole bunch of different Olympic-like pedigree type of styles, at that of the cruiserweight division, like that of Agasiev, and there are some other guys there who could really box like Glovacki and some of those other guys. Michael Hunter, who's a decent fighter as well. So Usyk has already done, made his bones. Dante always tries to make this point about we still don't know how good Usyk is. All that is horse shit. If Usyk was a black fighter from America, he'd be claiming that Usyk is just as great as Muhammad Ali. But the point is that Usyk is going to have to get a little bit of criticism for this because this is not a fight, once again, that really is relevant at the current moment in time. Wilder is no longer really that relevant of a fighter. He's someone overall that, once again, is a little bit washed up. So, it is what it is.
He has win over Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, but he does not have a win.
And also a win over Danny Dubois, who was on that of a great streak. Danny Dubois, I believe, who did he beat? He beat Filip Hrgović, I believe. Who was a good up-and-coming guy, although he was a bit overrated, but Danny Dubois ended up getting the stoppage over him because he was completely exhausted. There also was, I believe, that of an AJ Anthony Joshua, and of course he also ended up getting that victory, I believe, over Jarrell Big Baby Miller. So let's just not sit here and act like those are the only two wins in that weight class. Usyk also had a great win over Danny Dubois.
And over a young lion in that weight class, which is something that all the greatest heavyweights of all time have. From Muhammad Ali to Lennox Lewis, even the Klitschko brothers, Holyfield, the Klitschko brothers.
Once again, this is basically Dante's way of saying that I will never put Usyk up there with the greatest heavyweights of all time because I know that would put him in all-time great level conversations. And if I put him in all-time great level conversations, that's going to dilute the black greatness within that of boxing history. That's basically what Dante is saying. But anyway.
Lewis, they fought the best fighters in their weight class, which is something that Usyk is not willing to do. So with all the guys in the heavyweight division right now, we don't...
Right, Oleksandr Usyk is not willing to do that, even though he's already fought Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, and Danny Dubois. This is so fucking ridiculous. Now, don't get it twisted. I do understand that the Deontay Wilder fight is not a good fight. But this narrative of Oleksandr Usyk is not willing to fight the best in his weight class, all that is a fucking joke. How do you fight the two best heavyweights of your era, completely beat them, and you're not willing to fight the best of your weight class? Come on.
No, if Usyk is the best fighter in that weight class. But we know he has an enormous...
You see overall, once again, what DontaesBoxingNation says. We don't even know if Usyk is the best fighter in that weight class. This is pretty much his tactic of trying to put Usyk so low in comparative to the all-time great heavyweight conversations. Just fucking knock it off, man. We don't even know if Usyk is even in the best of that weight class. He beat AJ. He beat a Tyson Fury. Like, what else do you need to know that he's the best of that weight class? But remember, this is the same guy that was claiming that Deontay Wilder is the best heavyweight in the world after defeating bum after bum after bum and guys like Eric Molina and fucking Dominic Breazeale. Like, give me a fucking break.
Enormous amount of respect for Fabio Wardley. To vacate his belt instead of fighting him and defending his belt, it speaks volumes about Fabio Wardley, at least from Usyk's perspective. And it's not just Fabio Wardley.
And it's very possible that Oleksandr Usyk might be doing this, overall, once again, to kind of do a Mayweather-like tactic, to where maybe he might vacate a belt and say, well, you know what, Wardley and Itama, let's see who wins between those two, or Wardley and someone else, Danny Dubois, let's see who wins between those two, and whoever the winner is, I'll fight them, because let's say if Danny Dubois and that of Fabio Wardley, if they fight, if Danny Dubois ends up defeating him, it makes Usyk's win look all that much bigger, and he doesn't have to do as much work. Now, that being claimed, do I think that, it still would not make Usyk look as great? No, I mean, yes, I do, because I think that it would be better for him to get that victory first. But anyway.
You have other good heavyweights in the top 5. I mean, you have the interim champion for the WBC, Agit Kabayel. You have Martin Bakole, Frank Sanchez, and a couple other ones. But Moses Itama.
I don't really take Frank Sanchez nor Martin Bakole really that seriously. Frank Sanchez is someone that is a good fighter, but he tires out in the second half of fights. He's also someone that does not really throw that many punches. Usyk, in my view, would stop him. He is someone overall that would get completely overwhelmed by that of a Usyk. I also just think that Usyk is more talented than him in every way, and probably more athletic than him as well. When you talk about that of Martin Bakole, he's a very good technical boxer, but he's also someone that keeps his hands down very low. He relies a lot on his size and his weight. He does not have always the best stamina, and he's someone that just gets hit way, way, way too much. And on top of that, is very undisciplined for his fights.
One who's ranked really high, but he's not ready to fight any of the guys in the top 5 right now. But there's a lot of heavyweights who are, which means there's no reason for Usyk to be going after a Deontay Wilder. We know that Terence Crawford, he retired as the best fighter in the world, and he retired fighting the best competition at age 38. So there's no excuse for Usyk. Now, by way of contrast, a fighter...
Well, I do agree that there is no excuse to be fighting Deontay Wilder, or at least, in my view, to not fight that of a Fabio Wardley. I do believe that that is the better fight. But let's also not forget that Terence Crawford, there were times to where he was presented fights and he did not want to take them because he also did not see the importance of them. Like, I remember when Terence Crawford, he couldn't get a fight allegedly with anyone at the PBC, because apparently they were all avoiding him, although he kept signing with the promotional company. That was the opposite of them anyway. But the thing overall is that they were saying all this stuff, and Sean Porter had presented himself, or the fight had presented itself, and Terence Crawford said that he was not interested in it. And DontaesBoxingNation and all these guys, they were saying that, oh, well, you guys are just criticizing Crawford because he's black and all sort of stuff. So it's obvious that it's really, dependent on who the fighter is, who Dante criticizes. But that being stated, Usyk is going to have to fight one of those undefeated contenders. He's just going to have to.
Like Naoya anyway. He's in a very weak division. He really has no one to fight in that weight class. In order for him to fight real competition, he has to move up to 126. But that's not the case for Usyk. Once again, there are some tough heavyweights that he can fight, and he's choosing...
Right, so let's remember this. If Oleksandr Usyk fights that of a Fabio Wardley and fights that of an Agit Kabayel, and if he clearly beats both of them, that means that Usyk's resume and that his legacy is even going to be further updated, right? DontaesBoxingNation ain't gonna do that. All he says overall, he says this bullshit all the time. He did the same thing with Canelo. He did the same thing with other fighters about this guy is, a real fighter. He can really box, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as they beat them, Dante just says, oh, well, they weren't really that good. So, I mean, the point is that Dante's never going to give Usyk any props anyway. But Usyk is, for those of us that are logical and objective, he is going to have to fight some of the undefeated contenders. He is going to have to fight the likes of Agit Kabayel and fight the likes of Fabio Wardley. And it also would be very interesting to see the Moses Itama fight as well.
Not to fight them.
Although Moses Itama might be a little bit too fresh and a little bit too skilled for where Usyk is right now, because in my personal view, from what I've seen, he is slowing down to a certain degree. Now, if it was Usyk from several years ago, I think overall that would be a fight that would be very interesting, and I probably would favor Usyk, or that it could go either way. But right now, Itama is very, very skilled, and I think that Usyk can, still possibly defeat him. But he is getting a little bit older. He is getting a bit slower. And in order to defeat someone like that of a Moses Itama, you have to be at your A++. Because he is very young, he's very powerful, and he's a very good fighter.
Once again, one of the reasons why you cannot compare him to great heavyweight champions like Holyfield, Lennox Lewis, or Vitaly.
And once again, this is pretty much Dante's whole entire agenda, which is what I basically called out from the beginning. This is really the point of this whole entire video. It's not to say that Usyk needs to fight Wardley. It's to say that this is why you can't compare Usyk to these guys. That's the reason why you can't compare Usyk to these guys. First it was, Dante said, well, you can't compare Usyk to these guys because he's in a weak era, but now it's overall because, he's avoiding guys. So it's very obvious that Dante just changes the narrative depending on what the day is or what the feeling of the moment is. But once again, it's very obvious that he is always going to go after Usyk in order to tear him down. And the reason why he did this video is because, once again, he never talks about Usyk in a positive way. He only will talk about him if it's to tear him down or to tell you how he does not compare to that of older heavyweights, which is very obvious that he does. Oleksandr Usyk is greater than certain guys like Evander Holyfield. He is. He is greater than Mike Tyson. He is greater than guys like Riddick Bowe. He is greater than guys like George Foreman, in my personal view. Now, for an all-around heavyweight, does he probably have as much accolades as those guys? Not necessarily, but in terms of accomplishments and the A-grade level names that he did beat, one could actually debate that he's over guys like George Foreman and that of an Evander Holyfield. One could debate it. Because when you talk about Evander Holyfield, the A-grade wins that he had, or the big wins that he had, were Michael Moore, that of a John Ruiz, and I don't think that he was ever an A-grade level fighter. Of course, you have Mike Tyson, who really never won an A+ level fight in his career. And then, of course, you also have that one win over Riddick Bowe. Oleksandr Usyk had the wins over AJ, Danny Dubois, and Tyson Fury. And those Tyson Fury and AJ wins are colossal. When you talk about George Foreman, of course, he was able to beat that of a Joe Frazier. But when you talk about a lot of the other great fighters, he really didn't defeat a whole lot of other all-time great level fighters. And interestingly enough, people may not know this, George Foreman really only had about 4 title defenses or 3 title defenses in the heavyweight in total. I believe that, the only heavyweights that you'll find that he defeated that were probably truly great or great contenders were Ron Lyle, Joe Frazier. There was Axel Schultz, to where really he did not deserve to win that fight. And of course there was Michael Moore as well. And there are some other ones that, I'm probably not thinking of, but, it is what it is. But Usyk is up there with some of the all-time great heavyweights. You don't have to claim that he's necessarily on the same level as Lennox Lewis and Muhammad Ali or Rocky Marciano, whoever you put up there, but he's somewhat close to that realm. He's within, that of the Holyfield and those guys' realm. I'm sorry, but he is. Holyfield was a great fighter, but he also lost certain fights to both Riddick Bowe. He also lost to Michael Moore. He also ended up losing other fights in that weight class as well. Holyfield was a great fighter, but he was not someone that was unbeatable. All right, and Usyk was not only an all-around more skilled fighter than Holyfield, but he's someone that had the bigger wins in his career when he beat that of a Fury and an AJ Anthony Joshua. And certain people are going to say, what are you talking about? He defeated Riddick Bowe and Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson and Riddick Bowe, although great fighters, when you take a look at the wins in their career, Riddick Bowe was someone that, although a great fighter, other than that of Evander Holyfield, you're not going to find a lot of other great wins in his career. And Mike Tyson really only has that one great win in his career over Michael Spinks. Other than that, every time he got in the ring and actually fought someone who could box and fight, he got knocked out.
Klitschko, because he's not willing to continue challenging himself like they did. But when it came to Fabio Wardley, he surrenders his belt. And something else is pretty ironic is some people in the media, they were comparing Fabio Wardley.
Right, so if Oleksandr Usyk ends up totally defeating Fabio Wardley, that means that he'll be on the same level as guys like Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis. Isn't that right, Dante? We all know that he's not going to do that.
To a young Deontay Wilder. And that's because he has a massive right hand like Deontay Wilder.
Well, he has a massive right hand. He also got into boxing very, very late. He's someone overall that at times can be a little bit sloppy, but he's more technical than what Deontay Wilder ever was. That being stated, do I think that Usyk would really have that much of a problem with Wardley? No, but of course you never know. Usyk is getting older. Wardley is someone that does have great, great power. He could catch Usyk possibly and maybe catch him off guard and possibly get him one of the latter rounds. Especially if it's in Britain, then they're looking to stop it, a little bit early, just like the Joseph Parker fight. But I mean, it is what it is. But anyways, that being stated overall, And that fight may have been in Saudi Arabia, but it's obvious they were looking for Wardley to win that fight. That being stated overall, when it comes down to it, do I think that Wardley is anywhere near as skilled as Usyk? No, I do not. But it's still a fight that a lot of people, including myself, need to see. Because he is the top contender, and he is going to have to fight the top contender.
He's a much better boxer than Deontay. Way more coordinated. And clearly Usyk agrees with that assessment, because this is the reason why, once again, he's choosing to fight a Deontay Wilder who's way past his prime, nowhere near the fighter he was when he was undefeated. And even when he was undefeated, he was never really a gifted, talented fighter, at least not if you're comparing him to other BAs, because once again,
Well, I agree with that. But remember, you're the same one that put Deontay Wilder at one point in time in the top 4 pound for pound. That's what you did when you thought that he was going to become the best heavyweight of this era. And then when it was very obvious that that wasn't going to fly, you all of a sudden, kind of cast Deontay Wilder to the side. Anyway.
Comes to the skill set of a BA, the standard is set very high. So Deontay Wilder, his best attribute outside of his right hand was his heart and his determination, his will to win, not his skill set. It was never his skill set. And that's the reason why Usyk wants to fight him instead of fighting a young, undefeated.
Well, I think that Usyk once again wants to fight Wilder because it's almost like completing a whole entire checklist. It's almost like that, of the Kill Bill movie, like one of my favorite movies, or one of my, favorite duo movies of all time is the Kill Bill movies. Quentin Tarantino is one of my favorite directors. Anyone, of course, who knows me knows that I'm a big movie fanatic. And, of course, Kill Bill in that series, she could not complete her mission, until she was able to kill all 4 members or 5 members, I believe. There was Copperhead and, there was, I believe, the hell were the other ones, Cottonmouth and, played by Lucy Liu. All those are, anyone who's watched that movie knows what the hell I'm talking about. But the point overall is that that's kind of like Usyk. Athletes have certain checklists like that. They have certain goals overall that they want to complete, even if it seems a little bit unusual to the rest of the others. They want to complete that. I think Crawford kind of had that same thing with Canelo Alvarez. But Usyk wants to defeat Deontay Wilder because then he'll be remembered as defeating all the great heavyweights of his era. At least that's what will happen in his mind now. Do I believe that it's the best move? No, I don't. But I can understand his perspective.
Hungry lion like Fabio Wardley. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
My dad disappeared.
But that pretty much is about it for today. Once again, we knew, or at least I knew what Dante was going to use this as leverage for. Once again, because his goal is to make sure that Usyk will not be remembered as, in the same category with guys like Ali and Lennox Lewis. Now, do I think that, resume-wise that he's quite up there, at least with guys like that? Probably not. But he's someone that is not too far off from that conversation. He's at the very least in the conversation with guys like Evander Holyfield. Even if he were to lose his next fight, he's in the same conversation with those guys. Because he's defeated everyone that he's needed to in order to be in those all-time great conversations. He defeated AJ. He defeated that, of a Tyson Fury, 2 fights that he probably wasn't supposed to win, at least on paper. And then, of course, he defeated everyone at the cruiserweight division during his era that was the best. So Oleksandr Usyk has, a lot of contenders that he could potentially fight. And we'll see where this goes. But I understand the criticism. He does need to fight him. But once again, it's just interesting how, so far Dante really goes with this. Because you can tell what his true motivation actually is. It's not to get the Usyk and the Wardley fight to happen. It's really to kind of emphasize to you that I will never place Usyk amongst the all-time great heavyweights. That's pretty much what this video was about. But that pretty much is about it. Thank you all so much for watching. And I'll talk to you later. And we'll see where this goes. Hopefully, Mr. Usyk will eventually fight either an Ajit Caballel or a Fabio Wardley next. I would love to see the Fabio Wardley fight as well as Ajit Caballel. I'd love to see both of those fights. But that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all guys later. And hopefully, we'll see Usyk either change his mind or fight one of those guys next, because Usyk has stated that he does plan to stay for another couple of years, and I hope that he does. But we'll see. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.